Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I am Lisa Gieskes. Thank you for attending today's SCLA Continuing Education webinar. Please let me know in the chat if you have any technical difficulties. You can find our future webinars and propose your own as well by checking out the links provided here. Please note that we have a YouTube channel that we post our past webinars to, including this webinar, which will be posted there for later viewing. Do you have a special idea for a future SCLA Continuing Education webinar? Please submit a proposal to this link posted here. We are always interested in hearing what you are interested in. I would like to introduce Derek Wilmott, librarian from Clemson University. He is also chair of the Clemson University Commission on Latino Affairs. This webinar discusses the Creative Inquiry program at Clemson University. This project challenged a creative inquiry class to produce a mini documentary film through research in the special collections of Clemson. Can you hear me okay? I'm getting a little feedback that...
From me or from?
From an attendee that they logged back in and can't hear us. So I'm going to make sure that that is okay.
Okay.
And let's, yes.
Excellent.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to continue just to let people know to feel free to ask questions in the chat box during the presentation, and I will compile questions and our presenter will address them at the end of the session. Please make sure to mute your microphone. And again, a recording of this session along with presentation slides will be available and also emailed to all registered users. And now I will send it over to our presenter.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's see, let me go ahead and switch over here and make sure everything's in its proper place. There we are. Okay, so as this is loading up, thank you, Lisa, and I'd also like to thank the SCLA Continuing Education Committee for allowing me this opportunity to speak to everyone today. Thank you all for coming and taking part of your day to sit in on this presentation. As Lisa said, my name is Derek Wilmott. I'm the Acquisitions and Collection Management Librarian here at Clemson University Libraries, and today I'll be talking about Clemson University Latino Voices Past, Present, Future. This was a class that I had put together back in 2017 using all the resources that the library offered at that time to create a online course, not an online course, but a course at Clemson University for a grade. So what we're going to be talking about in today's session is how I put that class together, what the class design was like, the setup, the student engagement, their expectations and our expectations of the students, our learning outcomes that we accomplished during the course of the class, and then at the end, I hope to conclude it and have a moment of reflection. And if there's any questions or anything like that, please put them into the chat. Lisa, I think, will be moderating that portion of it, and I'll be able to answer those questions at the end of this presentation. So again, thank you for spending part of your day with me. So on with the program here. So a little bit about the class. This is a creative inquiry course that Clemson University offers. It's part of a number of different courses and such. And this particular one was called Library 2990, CU Latino Voices, Past and Present. Part of what we did was we created a documentary style film, which we'll kind of have near the end of this presentation. You'll be able to see our final product, our deliverable. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what inspired me to produce this film with students and how to, and our purpose in actually pulling this class together as a project. So it actually originated a number of years ago under when I was hosting the University Libraries Docu-Talks. It was a series that I developed back in 2007 to 2009, where we used documentary films to engage with our students and to showcase a number of our different resources that we had through the libraries on particular topics. So it could range from anything from global climatic change to alternative medicine. So the sky was the limit, but I was kind of thinking this was an excellent way. We had a number of students that would come in, and public and others that would come in, and it was just an interesting way to engage with our academic community here at Clemson, and that it was a very powerful way, a way of working with different people and coming across a number of different topics. So I put that in the back burner because I really wanted to know more about how to develop something like that with a lot more to engage more with my student body, with the students with a different type of method here. Another portion of the inspiration that I had for this was with A.D. Carson. He was Dr. Carson was a postgraduate student at the time, back in 2015, 2016, who had developed the See the Stripes campaign. And this was a part of a reflection of what was occurring at that time in 2015, 2016 here at Clemson, when a number of issues related to race and ethnicity were coming up, and some very sensitive issues were coming up that were being addressed with the See the Stripes campaign and other types of programs that were coming out at that time. Again, with Dr. Carson, he was looking at it from the standpoint of predominantly African-American students and how they've contributed to the story of Clemson University over time. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to learn more, to tease more of those stories out from other underrepresented groups. And my particular background is I'm Mexican-American myself, so I wanted to know more about the Latino presence here at Clemson and how to pull those stories out. When was the earliest Latinx member of that community to come to Clemson, whether they were a student, faculty, staff, and pull those stories out and put it put it into a class and develop that story and bring it out for others to see and to enrich the cultural narrative of Clemson. I also had the wonderful opportunity to meet Dr. Rhonda Thomas, who was also working on a creative inquiry class in preparation for a book she was working on, and as well as a tour that she developed here at Clemson called Call My Name. Now, her area of expertise was that she's in our English department, but she was researching the early history of African Americans, predominantly, more specifically, former slaves and convicts that helped to establish the first buildings here at Clemson University. So she had a slightly different agenda, but it was still another portion of a story that could be part of the Clemson narrative. Traditionally, the Clemson narrative had been with Dr. Reel, Jerome Reel's books, Volume 1 and 2 of High Seminary, and it addressed more of a wider spectrum of that story. And so these were other portions of that puzzle that were being brought forward and told into this that we were all thinking about doing here. So another portion of the puzzle that I needed to put together, so I had an idea to create a documentary style film that looked at the history of Clemson Latinos. We had inspirations from other people that were doing similar work. I had, back in 2015, the Clemson University had just established its, the library had just established its Adobe Digital Studio, which had other types of resources that were available. We had an Adobe Digital Suite of works such as software such as the Premiere Pro, which allows for the editing and production of film of one sort or another. So if you wanted to create a podcast, a visual podcast or an audio podcast, or even a documentary film or something of that nature, we could now do it here at Clemson University at the libraries, which was really exciting. Another component that kind of fell into place that helped me out in preparing for this class was the equipment that was provided that we would now have access to that would support the Adobe Digital Studio, which also had a green room and a mixing board for sound quality and such, so that we could produce a fine quality resource here for others to see. We had cameras that we could actually check out from the circulation desk now that were of quality, that for film and such, and it was just really exciting to have all these pieces starting to fit together. And then on top of that, we also had access to our archives and special collections. So everything kind of just started to fit into place. And then the final piece to it that really launched this for me was learning more about our creative inquiry courses. These are open to all faculty and staff members and different types of students, graduate students and such, to teach classes that were a little different than what you would receive in a more standardized classroom setting. They began in 2005, and up to this point, to date, they've supported over 33,000 student experiences and over 1,000 projects that are cross-disciplinary. So you might have somebody in the biology department working with someone with the arts, from the arts and humanities, or the English department itself, and on a particular project. These classes, like I said, are outside of your standard classroom experience, and it challenges the students and the faculty and staff to think outside of the box and to go beyond those topics that we normally consider as part of our classroom experience or educational experience here at Clemson. Now, part of the creative inquiry courses that we're encouraged to have recurring semester-long projects. This particular one was a full semester, 15-week course that I developed for Clemson University. And then we also had access to up to about $4,000 worth of funding that could support our work. So, which we availed ourselves to, and a little bit just to provide more, provide better equipment, more high quality cameras and microphones and such to help us out with creating our documentary film. So the CI University Library, the Creative Inquiry course that I had set up was established as a Library 2990 Section 1. It was a 2-credit course, 4 credit. We had 5 undergraduate students that had signed up for it, 2 instructors. I served as the primary instructor. There were 2 class advisors who also signed up to as students as well. They audited the class, and then we had 4 technical advisors that provided their expertise in different areas of for the class experience. And then finally, like I said, we had access to our archives and special collections that really we were able to capture a lot of the story from the past to bring it forward. Audio-visual equipment and the Adobe Digital Studio would help us to interview current faculty, staff, students, and alumni who self-identified as Hispanics and Latinos here at Clemson. So with all these in place, it seemed like a no-brainer to really get things moving along in that line. So I worked with my co-instructor to develop a course syllabus. and with benchmarks and learning objectives, class assignments, discussions, and specific, we hit weekly benchmarks. Every week we had an assignment that we had to, an objective to actually reach, because our final product was very important to us. We wanted to create that documentary style film. And we wanted to do it in a way that was meaningful for ourselves, for our students, and to contribute to the narrative here at Clemson University. So a little bit about the instructors and advisors that helped out with this class. So I was the primary instructor and devoted about 80% of my time towards teaching this class. And I'm actually, as I said earlier, I'm from the technical services side of things, so I didn't have that background in that one would have with teaching a particular class. So I relied heavily on my co-instructor to help guide me through that process. Dr. Margaret Warner, who was our literacy education professor in the College of Education. Her emphasis is in emergent bilinguals, and she was chairing the Latino task force back in 2015, 2016. She's since retired, but her assistance in this, her guidance in this, was really just very instrumental in helping me prepare this class from its inception onward. We had other class advisors, Nacheli Marcano, who was also a librarian here at Clemson University, and she served as an advisor in the capacity that she talked about the early or how Latinos and Hispanics actually self-identify. There's a certain way that many of us in the Latino community, the Latinx community, identify ourselves. We might do so from our country of origin. So some of us relate more saying we're Mexican or Mexican American or Chicano. So there's a lot of different ways. And so part of what she did was how would we be able to talk with our subjects when we started conducting interviews? How were we able to identify people of the Latinx community? And I'll interchange between Latinx, Hispanic, and Latino throughout this entire presentation here, just to give you fair warning, because a lot of this, while they're very similar in nature and almost interchangeable, there are differences between them. Dr. Rose Martinez Dawson, who's from our math department, and her area of specialty is in statistics. So she brought to the table, besides her enthusiasm to be working as part of the project itself and being down in our special collections and archives, because she really loved that portion of the work. She brought to the table the ability to help pull that information together, especially the area of statistics, and making it more meaningful when we created our final product here. We didn't get to include Dr. Oriana Aragon, but I wanted to include her in this portion of the presentation because we also had a marketing component that we wanted to work on, and she was in our marketing department and would have contributed in that nature, but due to the time frame of our class, we ended up not being able to work on that component. And then our technical advisors, Brenda Burke is head of special collections and archives here at Clemson University, so she brought her skill set into that and working with our students in that nature. Bobby Hollingsworth, Wes Smith are both part of the Adobe Digital Studio, and so they contributed from that area with their level of expertise. And Lori Bryant, who is our reserves coordinator in circulation, was able to help us know more about the equipment that we would be using to capture for our interviews and such, and what would be the best cameras and microphones to use in that process. So one of the things that I did was I wrote a course description that was included so that the students can understand what we were trying to achieve and what we wanted to accomplish, essentially. So this particular team, so something about creative inquiry courses that I wanted to mention was that it allows us to work more as a team, and so 9 of us were working on this, not just as 5 students or 7 students and 2 instructors, but as a team that was working towards a particular project. Now, there was a grade that was involved with it as well, and so Margaret and I provided that portion of it, and we also helped guide the students along with the project itself. So the students spent the entire semester working on capturing those stories and putting it producing a film, a video documentation of our CU Latino students, faculty, staff, and alumni, using our resources that we had available from the libraries itself. And so what their anticipations were and what our expectations were was that they would actually start working in our special collections and archives, learning what they could pull and tease out those stories that were relevant from the Hispanic and Latinx community to today. So they would data mine that and pull that out and then create a more salient story from that. And then they would use these things, as I said, to create a descriptive narrative of the Latino experience from the past to the present. The students also took time to participate in workshops, learning dialogues that would help them hone their skills, their interviewing skills, and their presentation skills, as well as learn about the university's, the library's resources in being able to develop their product, their research here. And then at the end, we as I keep continuing to mention, is we produced a short video documenting these experiences here. So as in the earlier slides, some of this is a little bit repetitious, but I just wanted to emphasize what our learning outcomes were. I really wanted them to learn how to produce and edit a documentary film, as well as to achieve a level of comfort in using the library resources and developing library research methods so that they could pool this information together and create something that was very meaningful for themselves and for all of us here at Clemson. And then, of course, using our full Adobe Digital Suite to work on producing this documentary film. Now, we had assignments that we had set, as I said earlier, with through our syllabus. So we had assigned readings, number of articles, and such. Before the class even started, we had a 2 to 3 minute video that we required all the students, and even those of us that were auditing the class, and as well as myself and Margaret, who contributed, to introduce ourselves, to feel comfortable in front of the camera, to explain why we were interested in taking the class. And so it helped us to learn about each other as well, and to create a more cohesive team as we worked on this project together. So, and we had a number of read and reacts that throughout the class to become a little more culturally sensitive to the Hispanic and Latinx communities. So when we actually started interviewing people, or when we were researching in the archives and special collections, that we had a basic understanding of our subjects in a sensitive nature there. We had we also watched the film Stolen Education, a documentary film by Dr. Enrique Alemán from the University of Texas, San Antonio. This helped the students to kind of see and develop ideas on how to create their own documentary film. Just a little shout out to Dr. Alemán. He came and spoke to the class as well. And his film and I highly recommend it. Stolen Education is about the untold story of the Mexican-American experience in 1956. And it was a landmark federal case called Hernandez et al. Versus Driscoll Consolidated Independent School District in Texas. And this was a post-Brown versus Board of Education film or ruling that occurred that further integrated the classroom. Prior to that, it seemed that over in Texas, the schools had integrated, but not the actual classrooms. So this landmark decision helped to integrate the classrooms for minorities, Hispanic students over in Texas and across the nation with through racial and ethnic lines as well. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend watching that film. Now, Dr. Alemán there described a little bit about how much effort and energy it took for him to create his documentary film, which was about 7 years. So we only had a semester to kind of come up with something for ourselves and to develop an excellent product that we wanted to be able to market at some point. Dr. Elaman had gave a number of pointers to our students as well as to us on how on some of the pitfalls of documentary filmmaking and some rewarding instances that he had experienced over time. And then we also learned about when we went down and had our workshop in special collections, we learned about archival research protocols, best practices, and such. And as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there was a letter grade that was associated with the class. The final product itself, the project itself, was 45% of the classroom experience there, so there was a high incentive for everyone to complete this class. Some of the challenges that we came across was time, actually. So our class met twice a week, an hour each time, and it was in the afternoons and the evenings for me. Since it was outside of my regular work responsibilities, much of this was on my own time, so it was definitely a labor of love. And then there was a realization that that one semester was just a little too short because we had to cut out the marketing component of it. Mentioning that there in this particular slide. And then the other portion of it was more of a technical issue. We use Canvas for our course software and Banner, which is our catalog. And we had difficulties with initially getting the class presented and being able to sign students up. There probably would have been a few more students for this project. Creative inquiry courses work best between 5 and 15 students, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So 7 was actually kind of a sweet spot for us, and it worked out, or 9 if you want to include the instructors, worked out very well for our experience. So we went and pulled all this information out from from the past, digging into our early histories of Latinos and Hispanics at Clemson. And the one that you'll most likely see if you go to our film, which is available on right now, only available on YouTube. So if you look up Clemson University Latino Voices Past, Present, Future, you'll be able to find it there. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight was that we were really surprised, and the students also were very surprised as well, that that the first Latino here came in 1914. He graduated in 1918 with a civil engineering degree, and Rafael Espinosa Rivera, he was from Veraguas, Puerto Rico, which is very exciting because that predates, what was surprising to us is that predates the integration of Clemson University and many of the schools across the country. So it was just a surprise and a pleasant surprise for us. Now, with anyone who knows anything about Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, and so people today that are born in Puerto Rico are automatically U.S. citizens. But back then, because in Rivera's case, in Espinosa Rivera's case there, he missed that date when that changeover happened by a couple of months from his birth. So he had to go through the naturalization process in 1916, 17, and became a U.S. citizen. Now, one thing that, and after he became a U.S. citizen and had graduated from Clemson University, Clemson College at the time, he became a civil engineer. He worked for the State Highway Department and lived in Columbia, South Carolina. So we've captured a lot of that in his story. The other exciting thing that we discovered was that he had also had a World War I draft card and had served in the U.S. Armed Forces in the Army. So there's a lot of different stories that we were capturing and bringing out as we were learning about the history of Hispanics and Latinos here at Clemson. It was very exciting there for all of us to discover this. So that was our past. So we started finding more, and talking a little bit about Clemson's early history here. It was a military school, for those that may or may not know it, until 1955 when it became coeducational, coeducation university at that point, and white women, and it was white women that were allowed to come to Clemson to make it coeducation at that point. It still predated integration of African Americans and others. So except for here, here we're seeing evidence to the contrary when it came to the Hispanic and Latino population. I don't know why that was the case, because in other parts of the country that wasn't necessarily so. There was still a separation for Hispanics and Latinos over in Texas or in New Mexico around this time that you see a number of these students from the past here. So it was just an interesting find for us. This is just a sample of series of box and folder results that we came across within our special collections. And so just kind of giving you a flavor of what we discovered. You'll see some of that in the documentary as well. And then once we had completed pulling all that information out and started pulling that together, we wanted to begin, we turned our attention to scheduling our interviews, identifying people that we wanted to speak to on campus that were faculty, staff, students, alumni, and to talk to them about their stories and find, and so we had put together a consent form to interview our subjects. We used GroupMe and other apps to communicate and coordinate our interviews themselves. On the right, you see our spreadsheet that we used in Google Drive there to set up those times, who's going to be the interviewer, who's going to be the camera operator, time and location of the interviews. We had a green room that I mentioned that we had available to us within RN Cooper Library as part of the Adobe Digital Studio, but apparently none of our subjects were interested in doing that. They wanted a more natural setting, something they were more comfortable sitting in and being interviewed at. And so we worked with them to allow them to drive the narrative in that regard as well. And then we also researched the type of equipment that we would use within the library itself, but also we were able to avail ourselves to purchasing some of the equipment, and which is now part of the library's circulation, and so that anybody can use at Clemson now. So as we started conducting our interviews, we started seeing specific stories and themes that started coming out of those discussions. And we had to take a lot of footage for a 15-minute documentary film. One of the things we had considered was that we had to think about early on in this class was how were we going to, how much of a film did we want to create? Did we want a 15-minute mini documentary film, 30 minutes, an hour? How much film would we be able to really, or how much of the story could we really accomplish in the time frame of a semester? And so we determined that 15 minutes was probably adequate at this point, because this was a bit of a pilot project for myself and for the libraries to experiment with. So on the left, what happened was once we started capturing all these stories and all this film, and we were watching all these different interviews, and what we had picked up from our earlier research in the archives and special collections, we started seeing themes. So on the right, you'll see a spreadsheet that had family and culture, bilingualism. These were the themes that we started capturing out of that. And out of that, we started to write a storyboard and a transcript that we developed over a period of time to narrate this story. And so there were even issues of discrimination, why people chose Clemson. It was very enlightening for us overall. It was exciting to be part of this. So these are just some of the images of the people that we interviewed and those that interviewed in the class there. So Kiana Vasquez was one of our students, and you'll see her. She's in the film quite frequently because she turned out to be our best interviewer. Others took that conducted some of the interviews, did a fabulous job as well. We, as I said, we talked to faculty, staff, students, and alumni here at Clemson, and it was really exciting to have all of them as part of this process. So I am not exactly sure how much, if I'm good on time here. So what I wanted to do next was to give you a little bit of a flavor of the documentary film itself and show that, which is a little unusual. I think this might be the first for our continuing education series here at SCLA. So I'm going to go ahead and try to play a bit of the film. We could talk about it. We broke it up into 3 separate parts. So we had a part of the story that was part of the past, which was the first section. Second section was devoted to the present day, and then part of the interviews that had taken place talked about the future of Hispanics and Latinos at Clemson. So I am going to attempt to make this work, and we'll see how well it goes. Lisa, let me know if there's any problems or anything, and I'll be happy to adjust as needed. Thank you. So here we go.
Clemson University is a state university situated in the upcountry mountains area of South Carolina, reflecting a skewed portrait of the state's population.
Thanks, Lisa.
We are Clemson scholars, and this is our hidden story, depicting our cultural wealth, ventajas y conocimientos, assets and knowledge, moving us towards excellence in education and a respectful place in an economically global arena. By the early 1900s, Clemson Agricultural College continued to grow its student body and began to enroll students from as far away as Panama and Brazil. These early enrollments were just a fraction of the student body. Rafael Espinosa Rivera was one such student. Early records indicate that Rivera began attending Clemson College in 1914. By 1918, he had graduated with a degree in civil engineering. Taps, the student yearbook, provided a brief insight as to how his fellow classmates welcomed him. Meanwhile, other Hispanics and Latinos from Puerto Rico, Brazil, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, and others would continue to enroll and work at Clemson College. Clemson's early commencement programs provided the names, place of birth, and degree names of 47 Latino Clemson students who graduated from 1953 to 1980. The majority of Latino students at Clemson from this time period pursued engineering or architectural degrees, though there were, of course, exceptions, such as Carlos Federico Lam Jr. from Panama City, who received a Bachelor of Science in Management in 1965, a Master's in Animal Science in 1967, and a Doctorate in Animal Physiology in 1970, from what had become Clemson University in 1964. In 1955, Clemson changed from a military school to a teaching college and opened its doors to white women. In 1963, Clemson integrated with its first African-American student, Harvey Gantt. Records indicate, however, that the first Latina student, Oriana Lantes Mendoza, from Santiago, Chile, wasn't admitted to Clemson as a graduate student in the School of Education until 1973. Between the mid-1980s to 2000, Presidents Cox and Lennon moved the university to a more prominent national level through a concerted focus on extensive research. Since 2000, Clemson's Latino population has slowly increased, giving them more visibility and imprinting their values and culture on the broader Clemson community. Was Clemson your first choice? Yes, for sure. Why?
Because I definitely also wanted to do engineering. So I definitely wanted to come to like the best engineering school down in the state. And Clemson was #1, proven to be the best in my opinion. So like okay, this is what we need to do. I was actually finishing my PhD and then where I was supposed to get or my next step, right? So I was just looking for options. I was applying like for postdocs everywhere, even I was applying Canada, Europe, many places, right? I actually have like 2 other offers, but I think when I saw Clemson, of course I did my research. I didn't know like Clemson, where is it? South Carolina, okay. So I did my research and I found out that Clemson is because I could research study, right? And then I researched like the group of faculty that will be in the department. I said, no, this is the best opportunity I have.
so I just took it.
Yes. So my parents are from a town called Jalisco, which is in Mexico. And so my dad actually came to the United States when he was 18, and he married my mom, and so my mom moved to Chicago with him as well.
Okay. And do you speak Spanish fluently?
Yes, I do. I speak Spanish. At home, we only speak Spanish with my parents. With my sisters and friends, it's mostly English or Spanish. But at home, I never speak English to my parents.
When I moved here, 27 years ago, I got a lot of negative reaction, and I look like my dad, so I don't maybe look as Hispanic, and I can't tell you how many times I would tell people that I'm from Miami, and their first comments would be, "My goodness, how could you stand all the Cubans there?" And it's like, well, my mother was one, so it made it a little bit easier, and that kind of, got people's, I mean, it took me a while to get used to that, because I just never really thought about it, just in my opinion. So many people from so many different places, so it was kind of a culture shock, and felt like I had moved back in time when I moved to such a small town that reacted that way.
So I remember my first semester, everyone was really nice, but I did struggle to find the other Latino people. So I mostly focused on going to, the Mexican restaurants and the Mexican stores in the community to find that outlet. Have you, so like what parts of Mexican culture do your parents and you really embrace at home?
Oh, of course. Primarily food, of course. We constantly cook, Mexican meals. We also, I grew up going to Mexico every summer, so that was something that we always did as a family. We took road trips and stayed 2 months there. As of now, because of security reasons, we can't go as often, but we fly every now and then whenever we can.
What differences have you noticed between kind of Mexican society and American society, or do you see major differences?
Well, there's definitely differences, of course. I feel like Latinos, Mexican, well, in my opinion, because that's what I know the best, we tend to stick together more. We're very family oriented, and we're specifically proud of our culture and of our heritage, and we constantly want to keep that alive.
In the very Latino way, I want to be a very involved grandparent one day, hopefully. So as far as where we end up, that it will depend on what the future brings. And my wife knows that's where we want. So my kids have visited Mexico many, many times, and they know that if they were to decide to go study there, they could. My oldest is in high school, so he's not really there yet. So we have talked about maybe moving to Mexico on retirement, but we have also talked of moving into other countries, on retirement, or even only staying here in the U.S. But like I said, some of it is going to depend on what's at that time.
Yeah, I think around where I've lived at in the United States so far, as time goes by, I've become more and more aware of how homogeneous it is. A lot of times in terms of sometimes political views, but also just kind of culture, right? But unless you really think about it and you just kind of try to get out there, it's hard to realize that this isn't what the world is. The world is just so much more cultures and so many little packets of worlds and ways of thinking together. But I feel I don't know, unless I go to a place that's really heterogeneous and mixed, I'm not gonna be able to really really appreciate who are we as what's really going on around the world.
So I'm going to stop it for just a moment because this one was a bit of a challenge when we were creating this film, and I beg everyone's pardon on this. We had, as you can tell, the film itself is rather organic in nature because there was a lot of different people that were working on this. And this particular portion of it, the sound quality kind of from the background, the ambient noise, overpowered, and we were not able to edit it out well enough so that we could hear him properly. So the way we overcame that is we put in closed captioning on the bottom there and typed all that information in so that we could understand what Francisco Gutierrez was talking about. He actually had been president of one of our student associations, Latino student associations here at Clemson, and has since graduated and moved on. So after our discussions with him, we went into talking about the future here with some of our alumni and others. So I'm going to just try to find the right spot. There we go. And I'll play a little bit of this, and then we'll wrap things up. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain any at that point. As you watch this, areas that I may not have covered, I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. And if I can't answer them in the time frame that we have for the remaining hour here, then please email. I'll try to email you back or contact you and follow up with whatever questions you might have. So just a little bit about the future here.
To not be scared to be a leader, because I know when I was president of Latino Unidos, I know I have a balanced organization life and academic life, and that was tough, but I felt like it was something that Clemson needed, and that was something I worked really hard to gain members, because like I said, there were so few Latinos that sometimes I would hold meetings and I would have one person come, but I wouldn't give up. I would hold another one, and then eventually 3 people came, 4 people came. I hosted events, even if it was just those 3 or 4 people, because it was just a matter of getting your name out there. Because I feel like a lot of Latino students, like I said, are first generation students that are trying to figure everything out, and they might be scared that they need to focus more on school, which they do. School is definitely the #1 part of coming to Clemson, but being a student leader in any organization, not just Latino organizations, will allow you to grow in ways that I don't think you realize that you grow until you experience it. And if there aren't any student leaders, then these organizations that previously worked hard to grow aren't gonna go anywhere. And then if they don't grow, then future Latino students aren't going to want to come because they want to see, they do this, or they have these organizations or that organization have events growing. So I would encourage them to come, but not only to come, not only to stay in their little bubble, but just to branch out and find different organizations, even if it's just once or twice a month, I guess.
There's more diversity on Clemson, and they're bringing, they know it's a concern. So I think in that sense, they're working on increasing diversity, right?
Do you think you're doing a good job of trying to get more diversity and trying to inform the student body?
Well, I think it's a difficult job, right? It's a difficult task, but I think we're going in good direction. As I mentioned, back when I came 2013, maybe I didn't know many people, but I didn't hear anything. I didn't know a lot of people. It was just a handful of people around, right? And nowadays, I see new hires, and from minorities and things like that, and they do more events, they send more emails, and they're hiring more people to help out, or recruiting more Hispanic students and minority students in general. I think that's good. Again, it's a difficult task. It's going to take time, but we have to start somewhere. Right?
Oh, wait, I'll go ahead
Stories that have been revealed
and let this play out.
represent
Excuse me.
many Latino voices at Clemson, shedding light on the importance of a university that values diversity and equity.
So that's basically our film at this point. It's something that we could continue on. I'd like to take us to the, let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to work here. There we go. So to kind of wrap things up here in the last few minutes of this presentation is our conclusions and reflections. And one of the biggest things that I learned definitely was you may think it's hard, but it is very difficult to put something like this together if you've not had the experience behind it. If you've had some experience, well then, this is definitely not, I think I would have probably been a little more hesitant to take it on initially, but now that I've gone through that process, it's made it a little much easier to produce this class, to create this class again at a future date. One thing that I wanted to mention here as well, that as part of this, was that we really had to think this class out from beginning to end and really prepare for it for the entire 15 weeks. So there was a lot of work, a lot of technical details that we had to manage before to make this class as successful as it was there. And then knowing who our stakeholders were, so having technical advisors and having people that can contribute to the overall instruction and learning process here for everyone, our students, ourselves. It really took a lot of time and a lot of energy, but I think the end result speaks for itself. It was a very good product in the end. One of the areas that we also had some challenges with was the editing portion of it. And then finally, one I wanted to mention here was as part of the outcomes, the Commission on Latino Affairs. Now, we contributed. I'm not going to say that this was a result of the film and for the class itself, but prior to 2017, there was this task force that we had, but it wasn't part of a larger narrative or instruction or environment, part of the environment of Clemson itself. But afterwards, we had the opportunity to have a commission on Latino affairs as part of one of 6 commissions that helped to increase the cultural awareness of Hispanics and Latinos here at Clemson. Parts of this film are being used now and have been used in this past year at the Clemson's Men of Color Summit, which is in its 4th year at this point, and has about 2,000 to 2,500 attendees in the last year and in the previous years as well. So people are starting to see the importance of having programs like this, classes like this here at Clemson. Another area is that our Office of Inclusion and Equity has a Hispanic outreach component to it that did not occur until 2017, so shortly after or 2018 actually, that was added on to it. And we have seen an increased student enrollment over a period of time. So up until 2015, 2016, there were self-identified Hispanics and Latinos were around 200 to 300. Now there's about 1,000. So there are some nice correlations that occurred in conjunction with this film. And we now also have 7 Latino student organizations, including 2 sororities and a fraternity. And then finally, there's been a number of programs that we've contributed with that this film has also been a part of. So Hispanic Heritage Month, our Dia de los Muertos at the South Carolina Botanical Gardens, and we've even hosted last year a Hispanic and Latinx Voices in Academia conference. And all of this, I think, was not as a complete outcome, but you can start looking back and seeing that this was part of a spark that kind of blossomed over time here at Clemson. So at this point, if there are any questions or anything, I'm happy to entertain those in our remaining minutes for this presentation. And I'll open the floor. If there's anything that you'd like to add, please put it in the chat, and Lisa will help moderate this portion of the discussion here.
I think there's a question about how would you replicate a program or a project like this
At another institution.
at another institution.
Okay, so yeah, I've thought about that, and so you really have to, I think, know what your resources are, and as I said earlier, knowing who your stakeholders are, and what opportunities your own institution might have. It may not be something like a documentary style film, but a podcast could be created as part of that process, whether it's a video podcast or even an audio podcast, which has even less. You don't have to have as much development for, and it can be much more organic in nature in that part of the as you develop that. If you've got a archives or special collections, to be able to pull information out that way, if you're interested in looking at the historical record, or you might be able to work with other offices within your own college or university to see where they've put some of that information, essentially, and how you can actually have those discussions. Maybe even working with your own history department or other departments within your college or university to see how you could bring these stories out, collaborating with other departments. I worked with the College of Education to help produce this documentary film because I didn't have the skill set initially to put something like this together. So working with others is really paramount to making a good product occur. And it doesn't even have to be some technical resource like that. It could be a paper that you develop, a book that you can start working on with others, and just kind of capturing those histories, teasing out those stories, I think is what's really important.
Okay, thank you. And as librarians, what can we do to maybe reveal some of the things that we have in our collections that people may not know about?
Well, again, it's just kind of finding those little nuggets that you have in your own collections. I know that not all our academic institutions or any of our, or not even not all our public libraries have access to the same types of resources. One thing that we did use that a lot of public libraries have access to is we used some of the information that we were able to draw from our special collections, and to add to that, we went to Ancestry.com, which we have a subscription to here at Clemson, to kind of supplement what we discovered, to kind of get a more full story. It doesn't, and one thing that we could have done was we could have just focused on one individual and built up on that story of that individual. And so there are various opportunities that are available. You just kind of have to kind of look around, see what you have that you have in your own institution, or you can even consider maybe collaborating beyond your institution with the local historical society or another university or college in your area, and seeing what you can kind of what information you can pull from those resources that might help you in producing a product there.
We have another question about whether or not you had any trouble developing and teaching the course and overseeing this major project while you're continuing with your regular library duties. How did you make that possible?
I put in a lot of hours in this. Like I said earlier, it really was a labor of love on my part. I did not have release time for it, but it was important enough for me, as well as for others that were interested in this project, to make it happen. So our students don't necessarily have a 9-to-5 job or a 7-to-3 or whatever type work there. So knowing that, I think I got a lot of energy from them to help making this class as successful as it was. And I think the product itself, the final product, it speaks for itself as to how much it was a labor of love from all our parts. And we had a very, I think the class, excuse me, I think the class itself had was very, we came together and worked together to as a team, and not, it wasn't necessarily just a class experience, but a team experience for all of us. And we looked at it from both ends of both portions of that, of the development for this program. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your work with us today. Again, if there are any questions that we weren't able to get to, Derek is happy to follow up with you. Thank you all for attending today. I will let everyone know our next webinar will be on copyright, and that will be presented by Tucky Taylor from USC Columbia on Thursday, July 25th from 2 to 3 p.m. Again, using GoToMeeting, and you can register on the SCLA Continuing Education page. Thank you all again.